To Geneva. We're going to speak to Krista Armstrong, spokesperson for the International Red Cross for the Middle East. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Is there much hope that this could actually work?
I think anything that can bring some respite in the violence and that can really have the consent of all parties is important, and we really are hopeful that it can work. But regardless if this particular agreement works, we need to see some relent and diminution in the violence, and we need to see a greater respect for the laws of armed conflict.
And presumably the rebel groups are going to be the key ones here, whether the ceasefire is actually stuck to.
I mean, all sides need to obviously agree to this, and in order for humanitarian agencies to cross lines and get to the people who are heavily affected by the violence and provide assistance, not just in one area, but on both sides. So it really needs, we need work with the consent. The International Committee of the Red Cross requires the consent of all armed groups and all armed forces before, having security guarantees in order to reach the communities who need it most, as well as to carry out repairs, assess needs in terms of infrastructure, hospital damage, and so forth. So we're hopeful that this will come into effect this evening.
Now, of course, we've been reporting for weeks, and you've been telling us about the dire humanitarian situation for many people in Syria. I mean, particularly just that one example we covered, particularly over the last couple of weeks around Aleppo. I mean, a lot of people in Syria presumably waiting with bated breath, with real everything crossed that could be crossed, that this does work.
I mean, people have been through so much. I think they need to see concrete action on the ground. We need to see some relent in the violence. Aleppo is a case where the violence has been intensifying since April. It got worse again in July and August. There was really nowhere and no place that was safe for people. So that's what people do need. I mean, right now you're talking about Syria, a country where a third of civilians are displaced within the country. We've seen over the past 10 days, 100,000 people displaced again in Hama. There's so many areas of need, and there's so much damage. Once a country that was so self-reliant and had and now its economy has been brought down. People's coping mechanisms are really stretched to breaking point.
And let's be positive for a moment. Let's just keep our fingers crossed and say this does hold. I mean, what do you need now? Is it access? Is it money to buy things for people, or what?
I mean, first of all, we need the security guarantees by all armed sides, all armed parties, and we need it to hold. So we need to be able to get into the different areas, not just for 48 hours, but be able to assess needs, enter, and then come back with the equipment and, the basics like food, like the other tools that are necessary to repair, restore water and sanitation services, for instance. So that's first and foremost. We need those security guarantees. Obviously, on the ground in Aleppo, we do have stocks in place, so we can bring them in fast and we can bring them to the people who need it most. Many people have been displaced, not just once, but many times. So that's, for the time being. But in the longer term, this is going to take much longer term commitment. It's going to need, months, if not years as well, obviously, to carry out vital repairs. So we're looking at the long term. And yes, we will need, the International Committee of the Red Cross would need funding in order to provide a sustained response, to support hospitals, to support essential services, and also just to support people to restore their livelihoods.
Krista Armstrong, good to have you with us on the programme today. Krista Armstrong joining us there from Geneva, from the International